Welcome to a late night edition of the PhinManiacs.com podcast. We are live now. It's 9:45. Had some minor technical difficulties, but now we are ready to rumble. We have a lot of stuff to talk about, and we have a lot of people to talk about it. We're joined by my co-host Chad Ronenbaum, Matthew Kanata, and Kathy D'Amato also makes her return to the show. So it's a very she's due for a show.
Who's Kathy?
She's Kathy. And, of course, our guests for the night, we have Ian Wharton of the Bleacher Report joining us again. And
hello.
We have... hello, yes. And we have Chris Early, otherwise known as Duke. He's my buddy, and he's here to talk some Dolphins. So, Duke, thanks for joining us tonight as well.
Duke!
Hey, good to be here.
What's up, bro?
What's up?
Okay, so got a lot of stuff to talk about. Obviously, we got to review the Jacksonville Jaguars game. That should be a lot of fun. Yeah, not. And we're also going to be talking about the coaching staff. That's been a very popular topic this week so far, and it's only Tuesday. And we're also going to talk about some stuff about Ryan Tannehill, because we can't go through 1 week without somebody saying something stupid that we need to fix. So, yeah, we're going to do that. It's time to educate some folks. But first, let's start with the Jacksonville Jaguars game. Needless to say, it was painful. I didn't enjoy watching it. I enjoyed live tweeting it even more. I enjoyed live tweeting it even less. Having to talk about how the Dolphins were letting the Jacksonville Jaguars, and not just the Jacksonville Jaguars backups gash them over and over and over again. It hurt. It hurt a lot. And this is with Ryan Tannehill balling out pretty much all game long, and that's with, again, a subpar offensive line, zero running game whatsoever to speak of. Even when the rare times they did run the ball, it wasn't working to begin with. So at this point, I was honestly to the point of why bother? They're not even getting 1 yard per run, it feels like. So, like, okay, fine. If all we can do is throw it. And Tannehill did his job for the most part. But there were some bad drops. It resulted in some bad results. And needless to say, a 23-20 score losing to the Jacksonville Jaguars, it wasn't pretty. And needless to say, again, the fan base is not happy. They are the opposite of happy. They are ready for heads to roll, and it's only been week 2. We're going into week 3 against the Buffalo Bills, and already people are calling for Joe Philbin to be fired. They want his head on a pike. They want Kevin Coyle's head on top of it as they burn it at a stake. It's not pretty out there right now. So we're going to talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars game, and I'm going to ask you guys, what the heck happened? Like, seriously, what went wrong? What can you think of one thing in particular that in your minds you can point out went wrong that we can point out, or was it just everything went wrong all at once and it was just bad all around?
13 penalties for 112 yards.
That's a big thing. Yeah. Undisciplined. That's pretty new for a Joe Philbin-led football team. We can say that he's not a leader and all that stuff, but Joe Philbin has been pretty consistent with his teams having no penalties. So that's something of a new issue. So that's actually a pretty bad thing. What else we got?
I think it was a perfect storm of everything that was going on in the game. I mean, you had the Brandon Albert injury twice during the game, right? And then the offensive line was in shambles throughout the game. Tannehill was getting pressured a lot, had to move around, scramble a bit. Some timely drops that no one's really talking about. Greg Jennings would have had a key first down in the red zone area, dropped it at the beginning of the game. Jarvis Landry towards the end of the game almost would have had the first down if he held on to it, would have kept the clock moving, would have kept the Dolphins moving down the field. Wide receivers had drops. We also had, as you saw, the secondary just, missing assignments, biting on plays, biting on fakes. Allen Robinson, the dude went off in the first half, and they shut him down in the second half, but by that time the damage was already done. The defensive line was getting absolutely no push on the offensive line, wasn't getting in the backfield. There was just penalties all over the place, like was just mentioned. It was just a perfect storm of everything. And you almost got the sense watching the game where you're like, all right, if this is really going to happen, they're really going to lose and not going to be able to pull it off, and that's what ended up happening.
Yeah, Matt, you pretty much wrapped it up in a nutshell there. I mean,
All right,
pressure on Tannehill.
goes over. Time to go.
Well, we could call it a night, but that's not that would be too easy. We can't let the Dolphins off that easy. So
Yeah.
so let's talk some more. Let's bring Ian into the show now because we brought him in and we wanted his perspective. He had some things to say about the game, and I want to get your take, Ian. Let's see, what do you got for us?
So I pretty much thought that this was pretty much the worst game you're probably going to see from Miami this season. So to try to give some perspective on this, like you said, 13 penalties. That's extremely rare. I don't know if you go through Joe Philbin's game logs. I would bet that there were probably no more than one or two with as many penalties as that. I don't think that is something that continues. I would say that that's sort of a byproduct of really bad execution on both sides of the ball, just undiscipline as well. You look at Olivier Vernon making the crucial mistake that basically sealed the game. As soon as he made that unnecessary roughness penalty, it was almost like Miami should basically just let the Jaguars score and try to come back with a full-length drive instead of getting the ball back with 40 seconds. Just very messy execution, and I think guys were in position to make plays. Brent Grimes dropped an easy interception where Bortles was staring down the field, and he read it perfectly, jumped in front of the pass, and just simply dropped it.
You're not allowed to say that, Ian.
Well, I've got Michael muted and blocked, so it doesn't matter. I learned that quick. Just get it over with. Like you mentioned, I mean, drops are part of the game to an extent. I can't really harp too much on drops as costly as they were because, let's face it, Blake Bortles, I think he had 4 drops that game that he dealt with from his receivers. So, I mean, Miami had 2 or 3. I'd rather be on the lesser end of that than the more side. So it's going to happen. Obviously, it just seems worse because of how crucial they were. The positives were definitely there. I mean, a lot of negatives happened, but the positives, if we want to look positively, the defense was really good in the second half. They were forcing punt after punt, 3 and outs. Tight end Jordan Cameron, when he was playing until he got hurt, looked like the superstar that we were hoping he would be. He and Tannehill are going to be electric if they can both stay on the field at the same time, which Tannehill obviously we know will, unless if he gets killed by Jason Fox's blocking. Cameron's obviously the bigger question, but I mean, if he's on the field, he is, I think, Miami's #1 receiver right now in terms of explosiveness and the way he stretches a defense. It's a huge asset that few tight ends in the league actually bring to the table. That's pretty much it for the positives. I mean, you had 2 100-yard receivers, but the negative on that is that you're throwing the ball a lot to 2 low-ceiling players that aren't going to make a lot of explosive plays. So you're spending.
Wait. Who's low ceiling? Jarvis Landry?
Yeah, Jarvis Landry and Rashard Matthews.
He means in terms of big plays. Jarvis Landry's not going to catch the ball and run 60 yards down the field. Neither is Rashard. They're catching it a few yards out there. Devontae Parker is a guy that has big playability. We haven't really seen it yet. Kenny Stills. He means that kind of way.
Yeah, and
okay,
also
because
also
Juice makes plays. Juice makes plays all over the place.
No, he does, and also in terms of their roles. I mean, part of it is they're not schemed to be big impact 60-yard touchdown plays. Rashard's basically just like Brian Hartline plus at this point, and then you've got Jarvis Landry in the slot, but he's not really running routes. He's running 2 different routes during the game, which is great for moving the chains, but it's not really overall huge in terms of the big picture. You've got to have a little bit more of the big play impact. And I'm not really saying an 80-yard touchdown all the time, but you've got to be able to threaten the defense on different types of routes, and Miami's not really able to do that with the personnel that they've got in there. So I mean, there's a lot to take away from this game. I don't think that the extreme end of the negatives is something that will continue though, because again, it was like you guys mentioned, it was kind of the perfect storm. They rushed back Brandon Albert, so of course he gets hurt because he's compensating for his one leg, so his hamstring gets hurt. Cameron Wake didn't play much, and when he did play, he wasn't good. So, like, yeah, you should be able to beat the Jaguars when that bad stuff happens, but it's also week 2, and we saw it last year that, like, Miami didn't really start clicking until after the first 3 weeks. So, on one hand, the positive is that you may have seen the worst that this team is going to play, and you haven't seen the best that this team's going to play, which you'd much rather have than the opposite at this point in the season.
Well, I think I would probably debate that Tannehill has started to make strides towards giving more of a big play potential. We see him making more aggressive throws. We see him hitting throws that normally we wouldn't. Obviously he still has his issues hitting the open man more in deeper routes. You saw Jordan Cameron was wide open, and although some people are counting it, I don't think that the missed deep throw, quote unquote, to Greg Jennings was actually a miss. It looked more like somebody's wires got crossed and Jennings ran the wrong route and Tannehill threw the wrong pass. That's just my perspective on it. I don't know for sure. I didn't see the coach's tape or anything like that. So if I'm wrong, I would be more than glad to hear about it. But as far as I'm concerned, that particular deep ball to Jennings didn't look like it was actually a miss. It was more like miscommunication. But the Jordan Cameron, there was no excuse.
I mean, even if it was a miss, though, I mean, you're going to miss on those throws. Every quarterback does.
Yeah, every quarterback does.
And Tannehill was hitting a lot more than he has before. And, I mean, I know that it's easy to sit there and say, well, it still wasn't enough. But it's like, realistically, like, that's a good enough effort to win. The fact that it wasn't, I think, says more about the things that were happening around him than it did him. I mean, at some point, it's got to be like, okay, someone else has to step up. Like, then you look at the drops, and then you look at, the running game and the play calling, and then defensive coaching after that. Because, I mean, that was really a performance where, like you say, Tannehill was probably a top 5 quarterback in the league in just week 2. If you just isolate his performance, I mean, there's really not more realistically that you should have expected from him.
Yeah, and I think what it is that. And I'm going to also bring up this point. You mentioned how Brandon Albert was rushed back, and so he's not fully healthy. I think it's not so much his injury as is the result of said injury. Because he hasn't had the chance to get his strength and conditioning back, he's out there playing like he's not in shape. He's not in football shape. And just speaking from somebody who's not in shape, when you try to push yourself too hard, he's trying to be his Pro Bowl self while his strength and conditioning still needs a lot of work. I don't think his knee is a problem right now, but when you try to push yourself too hard and your body is not physically prepared for it, not injury-wise, just like strength and conditioning, you become privy to a lot of different kinds of injuries. So maybe if he's getting a cramp, or maybe he pulled something that he wasn't supposed to, I don't think that's a result of the ACL and MCL injury. I think that's a result of coming back. He hasn't had the chance to get his stamina back. It's not his injury, it's his strength and conditioning.
And I agree with you on Brandon Albert. Ian said they rushed him back, and I completely agree. They totally rushed him back. But we can see why they rushed him back. I mean, look at Jason Fox. He comes into the game the other day, and Jared Odrick just blows him up twice, 2 times in a row, causes a fumble at the 1-yard line, although Jason Fox was smart by stepping out of the end zone to recover the fumble so it wouldn't be a safety. But, I mean, you could see why they rushed him back, and they have no choice. But now, he's going to be lingering with injuries throughout the entire season, most likely, and he's never going to be the same as what he used to be. He said he almost never came back from the injury to begin with. So the Dolphins' offensive line, I said it today earlier on Twitter, the team is what it is. They're not going to get some savior to come in. People are saying Evan Mathis, but guess what? He's in the bottom half of the guards in the league right now. He's not doing very well in Denver right now. I know it's still week 2, but if we're saying it's week 2 for Evan, why can't we say it's week 2 for everyone else on the Dolphins as well? So really, there's no good answer out there. The Dolphins have what they have, and unless we get some kind of Brady on the bench on the offensive line, the Dolphins just need to find a way to scheme around their weaknesses. Maybe give Billy Turner a chance. I know the coaches have been extremely hesitant to, but can you get much worse than Dallas Thomas right now? Or Jason Fox? Put Dallas Thomas or Billy Turner at left tackle.
Turner
was a left tackle in college.
I agree with you on that, Matt. And I've been kind of listening to you, and you guys have made some valid points, but I can tell you, like, definitively right now, Miami is just going to get destroyed by Buffalo if we run a three wide receiver set all game and expect our offensive line to block them. We just to preview what Jacksonville did, to just say how bad it is, the rarity in which Jacksonville rushed more than 4 pass rushers was very rare. They ran 4 defensive linemen the whole game. They were missing Senderic Marks. I would go out on a limb and say the Jacksonville defensive line is not even close to the quality of defensive line that Buffalo's is. And Dallas Thomas gave up sacks one-on-one. Jamil Douglas gave up sacks one-on-one. Jason Fox got destroyed one-on-one. Our left tackle, whether it be Brandon Alberts or Jason Fox, are unable to run block right now. That's why we hardly run left. We ran right the majority of the game. Our offensive line is a mess right now, and the unfortunate part of that is Joe Philbin is so stubborn. We are not changing our offense to adapt to that. I know that Deion Sims is hurt. I hope he's back this week, but we've got to start running more two tight end sets, and we've got to consider putting Billy Turner in at least in third and short, so we have a guy that's better at run blocking than either Dallas Thomas or Jason Fox. I just don't know how they're going to expect to be able to have Tannehill form a pocket when the Jacksonville Jaguars were putting pressure on him all game with 4 down linemen. Again, Jared Odrick is not an explosive defensive end. He's kind of a hybrid D tackle D end, and he was just blowing right through Jason Fox on several plays. And so that's, to me, the biggest issue right now is that. The other is the game calling. I don't know if how much authority Tannehill has to audible, but we ran right twice in that game from our own 40-yard line when they had 9 people stacked in the box. The safety and linebacker were both up tight on that side, and we ran right at it. Once for a 5-yard loss, and the other time I think we had a 1 or 2 yard gain. I have no idea why you would not audible out of a play call where you're running right into where they're stacked at on defense. Also, we were running 3 wide receiver sets or 4 wide receiver sets that game, and when we do run the 3 wide receiver sets, we have Jordan Cameron in there, who is not a great run blocking tight end. And even despite that offensive formation, the Jacksonville Jaguars continually stacked the box. They were playing 1 deep safety and press man corners. We were not throwing deep on that at all, and the reason is because the teams feel like, 1, we're not a threat to hit the deep ball that often. We're not that accurate at it. And 2, we don't have the offensive line that can block long enough to throw the deep ball. And so you got to think of how limiting that is on offense. 1, you're trying to run into a stacked box. 2, all of our passes they like to throw a lot of intermediate route stuff. And when the linebackers are not playing up, they're just sitting back because they don't have to worry about blitzing. It's extremely difficult to throw, those 5 and 10 yard routes when they're sitting out there. And, again, when they were playing that press corner a few times, they were throwing that quick pass out to Kenny Stills, and they're press covering him. And so that's an extremely difficult play to execute and get positive yards on rather than send him deep and try to push the field. So I guess my point is Philbin, and I suppose to an extent Bill Lazor, they want to have an explosive offense that scores a lot of points. But that offense is doing the complete opposite. It's not scoring a lot of points. And so, and people can criticize Coyle and the defense all they want, but the reality is Miami shut Jacksonville down that whole second half. I mean, as a matter of fact, Jacksonville did 3 straight 3-and-outs in the late third quarter going into the fourth quarter, and our offense was not able to score points. And so you got to have realistic expectations. We have not put pressure on a quarterback yet this year, and that we play people like Kirk Cousins and Blake Bortles. Those quarterbacks are not being put into a position where they got to pass the ball under pressure whatsoever. They can run conservative routes, they can run the ball, and they don't have to worry about scoring points because our offense right now has been very, very sporadic at best at putting points on the board. So my opinion is we've got to look at changing the game plan. I mean, if we expect those 5 linemen minus, I don't even know if Brandon Alberts will play, but if we're expecting them to block that, I mean, what are we facing? 2 Pro Bowl level D tackles, pretty close to Pro Bowl level D ends in that game. I don't know if Tannehill will survive, guys. I don't want to sound bleak, but I mean, I don't think we're going to be able to stop them from just destroying our offensive line if we don't change our formation.
I mean, what can you do to fix that? You can do quick passes. You can put Tannehill in the shotgun. You don't have time to throw deep anymore. So again, this defense is stacking up the box. They're playing down low. You're playing in a 10-yard, 20-yard box again, just like the same situation last year and the year before. Because surprise, the offensive line isn't very good and can't sustain their blocks long enough. So I mean, I feel like the Dolphins really can't get around that since their offensive line is so bad. They need to put, I feel like, Billy Turner in, as much as the coaches, for whatever reason, don't seem to like him, put in Turner and see what the guy can do. I mean, honestly, you can't get any worse.
Turner at left tackle is something that Duke's been harping on for the past
He
couple of
played it
years
all
now.
in college. He played it at North Dakota State. Obviously, that's not the level that you see in the NFL or the SEC or the ACC or the Pac-10 or the Pac-12, or the Big Ten Pac-12. But come on, you got to give the guy a chance.
Honestly, what I would do, which I just don't believe the Dolphins will do, is in this game, playing against Buffalo, their defensive line is so good, I would probably make my primary play formation two tight ends. I hope Deion Sims is able to come back from his concussion. If he were, we have a formidable two tight end set with Jordan Cameron and Deion Sims.
You got to hope Cameron's healthy too.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we have them, but if those guys are available, I would run two tight ends sets, and then I would probably run 60% of the time, and I would pound the ball and pound the ball. I would play Billy Turner, like you say, with the idea I'm not going to put him in as many pass protection, and I would force them to come up a little bit. And even if you're getting 2 yards and 3 yards a run, that means we're playing for 3rd and 2s and 3rd and 3s. I would also throw up some balls to Devontae Parker. We drafted him really high in the first round. They've hardly utilized him whatsoever. And it's not that hard to coach a guy to basically do a fly route when it's one-on-one coverage. And do you think that Allen Robinson was open on those plays they were completing to him? I mean, was he running free?
No,
he was.
No, there's one Bob where
he had a guy all over him. He was jumping up and making a play on the football. And I don't know why you wouldn't try to do that if you get one-on-one coverage with Devontae Parker. He excelled at that in college. So I would take some shots deep down the field to Devontae Parker, maybe to Kenny Stills, and I would pound the football. But unfortunately, I don't believe Miami will try to do that. I think they will run primarily 3 and 4 wide receiver sets, and they're going to try to get that ball out quick, and they're going to be doing that against press man coverage with the safeties and linebackers sitting in the middle, basically saying you need to either beat us throwing the ball down the field or you need to run the football. They're not going to allow Miami to run a lot of short passing offense to try to beat them. And that's just my opinion what you're going to see happen.
One thing that, I think if you look at the Patriots game, is they gave the blueprint on how to attack that defense. And, I know intuition would say, intuitively, I agree. You would want to line up 2 tight end formation, pound it, but I mean, let's be realistic here. That's going to get Miami's offense killed. They're going to get destroyed in the trenches with that. So, because the Patriots have no better offensive line. They're just as bad as Miami, and actually might be a little bit worse, considering their tackle play has been as bad as Miami, and at least Miami has Pouncey. So, if you look at what New England did, is they basically forced the matchups upon Buffalo. Because with Buffalo's defense, they're much more risk-taking with Rex Ryan than they were previously. So that's going to create some havoc on their end with as far as miscommunications, not knowing exactly what they're doing. And they got caught in that a couple times. Especially exposed them up the seam with Gronkowski. Julian Edelman, of course, he's just a guy that gets open all the time. So, but the thing that they did is they went 4 and 5 wide often, and then they would just dump the ball off in the flat and let their guys work in space and kind of work more towards the sideline than the middle of the field. And I think that Miami could do the exact same thing. They've got the personnel to do that. And I think the big difference between this year and last year and the last couple of years that they've faced them is they have actually got good receivers now. Miami has the talent at receiver now to win one-on-one. The only receiver they used to have that could do that was Mike Wallace, and he was still extremely limited with what he was going to be able to do. I think their big issue the last couple weeks is, they haven't used their 2 most explosive receivers. they've just been sitting on the bench not doing anything. Or when Stills comes in, he's just a complete gadget player because he's only doing double moves or like the occasional curl route. So like his usage is so predictable. And Miami's doing the same exact play when they're trying to go deep to him. They're doing a rollout to the right, and then they're trying to hit Stills in the corner of the end zone. Like there's just no space for that. It's predictable, and there's not much space in the back of the end zone to hit him. And as soon as that play's covered up, all they're doing is just Tannehill's either just throwing it away or trying to dump it off to a back, and it's just a very limited play set. I think they're better off spreading out Buffalo and trying to attack their cornerback depth. As good as Stephon Gilmore is, I mean, I think you try to get Darby with Parker as often as possible because Parker, that should be a dream matchup for Miami. And then if you have Cameron available, Cameron should eat in the middle of the field. I mean, he's not that. I mean, Gronk's obviously like to the extreme end. He's probably like a top 3 player in the NFL right now. But Cameron's capable of beating their safeties and beating their linebackers in coverage without much of an issue. Otherwise, you're just kind of playing into their strengths. I would not want to be running into that defensive front. You want to get rid of the ball as quickly as possible so that you kind of negate their strength.
I would like to see them succeed at that, Ian. I don't believe they're going to be able. I think you're going to see a terrific amount of pressure on Tannehill with just their front four. And I know Rex Ryan traditionally likes to do a lot of blitzing, but I think he's going to realize he has no need to blitz. I don't think you're going to see him sending linebackers and D-backs or safeties very often at Ryan Tannehill because I think they're going to get adequate defensive pressure out of their defensive front. And I mean, I don't know who Miami's going to be starting on the defensive line. If we do have Brandon Albert playing, he hasn't looked bad in pass blocking, but if our starting left tackle is Jason Fox with Dallas Thomas, I mean, I just don't see those guys being able to hold up very well against the Buffalo pass rush. And so trying to get the ball out quick, I just feel we're going to be forcing Miami to try to beat them vertically. And so I hope you're right. I hope they this week they really decide to feature Devontae Parker because he's so much more explosive than Rashad Matthews down the field or Greg Jennings. And in particular with Greg Jennings dropping, a critical pass early in the game last week, if he's not, making catches, he's had some drops. I mean, why don't we have Devontae Parker in there more? I know he's young, but he's just having a guy in there like Devontae Parker and sending him down the field vertically. That in itself forces Buffalo to respect their safety play a little bit more and maybe open underneath a little bit more for Landry and Cameron, because if we just don't go after them, like if we are not aggressive on offense and try that short pass, get it out quick offense, I mean, that's what we've been trying to do for the last 2 or 3 years against Buffalo. And granted, our receiving core is better, but I mean, I don't know that it's that much better if we're not pushing the field, I guess, per se.
One thing I think will be interesting will be the running game. I mean, it was non-existent against Jacksonville, but Lamar Miller in the running game has traditionally done well, or at least last year, against both Buffalo and Rex Ryan led teams. He rushed for over 4 yards a carry against all of those opponents. Even if you take out the long run against the Jets, he was still averaging over 4 yards a carry. So for whatever reason, facing those teams that are very good run defense teams, he does well against them. So if they can get the running game going, I think that's going to be a big boon to Tannehill and everyone else. If you look at those drives, because I've seen some comments on our side and things about, well, look at all those plays, those drives we had in the second half. Every drive in the second half, not counting the very final drive, which was really irrelevant, every one of them had at least one play of 10-plus yards, or a down of 10-plus yards. 1st and 20, 2nd and 11, something like that. Every drive had that. You cannot sustain that type of it was either a sack, a negative run, a penalty, something. So I think they've really got to get the run game going. And it's really kind of been bothering me since the preseason because aside from Lamar Miller's big run against the Bears, I didn't think the running game looked that great, at least from the starters in the preseason.
Did we lose Chris there?
I think we did.
I mean, stop with the
Duke, we lost you for a second. Can you repeat what you just said?
Okay, sorry. I think my computer's acting up or something. I'm just saying they need to establish the running game a little better than what they've been doing. It worked well against Washington in the second half. I don't know what changed necessarily, but that's something I think they need to do. You can't have these negative runs or these short runs. I mean, I'm as big a fan of Tannehill as anyone out there, but you cannot consistently expect him to win on second and third and long every time, and that's what he's been getting. Every drive in the second half of the Jacksonville game, except for the one they scored a touchdown, he had a play that was a down that was more than 10 yards. If you get that against Buffalo, you're going to lose. You have to get these shorter downs because then you can open up the playbook a little bit.
Oh, I think they need to add. You're right on that, and it's not just. I mean, they had some decent runs against Jacksonville, and they would be like 3 or 4 yard runs. And granted, that's not ripping off a game breaker, but to me, they abandon it. Just their tendency is to abandon the run way too quick. And as a defensive coordinator, if you have tendencies, that's almost like poker, where the other players start to realize what your tendencies are, and it hurts you offensively as a whole. And so, if you're defending Miami, let's say you're a defensive coordinator right now, and Miami runs the ball on first down and they get 2 yards, so it's 2nd and 8. What do you think the odds are the next 2 plays are going to be a run versus the next 2 plays be a pass if you had to call a defense?
100% pass.
Exactly, and so you're already playing into the idea that they are already defending pass on their calls, and that alone makes it already harder to succeed. Yeah. And so it's all right in my mind if you get 2 yards to run it again, not every time, but increase the number of run calls you're making, so at least defensively they have to respect that. Because if you even come up and the next run's another 2 yards, and so you're coming up to 3rd and 6, well, I mean, is Miami much worse off trying to convert a 3rd and 6 versus trying to throw 2 passes into a pass defense called on 2nd and 8 and 3rd down? So I don't know. To me, and that's if they hold both runs. And so, again, I'd like to see them run it just a little bit more, even if they're not big gains, just to, I know that's kind of a cliche to keep the defense honest, but it feels like Miami's almost always going 60, 70% pass all the time. And even if they're running it semi-effectively, they abandon it much quicker than they need to.
And part of the problem with that is they use these little short dump-off passes as an extension of the running game. I've argued with some folks on our side about they say Tannehill needs to throw less, and I'm in somewhat of an agreement. But you're not, with this type of offense, we've not seen that you're going to get a 50-50 kind of split. You're probably going to get close to a 60-40 split, but at least 3 to 4 passes every game is going to be basically a long handoff. Like the very first drive of the Jacksonville game, you had the big play to start with, and then there was a run at some point in there, and then there was a little short pass to Kenny Stills that gained 0 yards. In my opinion, those are just wasted downs. They should stop running that play. It's not working. And especially when you run it so often, teams are expecting. I mean, other teams use wide receiver screens, but they don't, throw them, 5-6 times a game. I don't mind the short passing as an extension of the running game, but they need to do just a better job of the play designs. For an example, Jacksonville had one similar to Rashad Green. He just dropped the pass. It is basically a quick slant, and they were, I can't remember the exact formation, but they had receivers split out. There was a guy in the slot who pretty much just ran forward and started blocking, and the ball, by the time he engaged the defender, the receiver would have caught the ball. And it was a play design. I thought to myself, that's the kind of stuff Miami needs to run. I mean, if you get a guy like Stills with his speed, or Landry, and that type of play where they have a blocker in front, and some room to operate, but they don't do that. They just run these same plays, and teams expect it, and it goes nowhere, and you end up with these, 3rd and longs again. So I'm with you. They just need to basically get into the I formation, put Earl Mitchell back there as a fullback. They have to, and just run the ball. If it gains 2 yards, it gains 2 yards. But
Can't we put Ndamukong Suh back there? I mean, I understand Earl Mitchell was a fullback in college, but seriously, the one time Mitchell was a fullback, he wound up running free as a lead blocker, and then Miller got eaten from behind him.
Well, I mean, that's kind of fun. I mean, I think it's cool that they do that, and I've been preaching that they do need a short yardage offense. So when it's third and
Gray.
1, yeah, well, yeah, Jonas Gray's family, but when it's 3rd and 1, I want to see Billy Turner in the game, and I want to see them either quarterback sneaking or power in the football. I think you give up so much of your statistical chance of converting when you stick with 3 and 4 wide receivers in 3rd and 1 or 3rd and 2, because you lose that. It's so difficult, no matter how good a defense you're facing, to prevent a team from gaining 1 yard when you just put in your power guys and push forward. And Miami they never utilize that advantage. But the other thing I was going to say on Chris or Duke, I don't have a problem with Miami's play calling. It's the tendencies, and it's just I think when they're playing, you got to be just a little bit more aggressive. They do so many short passes out, whether you call them extensions of the run or they throw a lot, to Jarvis Landry on quick slants, and they like to do those 10 or 15 yards. I know they threw some vertically, and we weren't really hitting them in the game, but again, with a player like Devontae Parker on the team, I'd like to see them, probably once every 8 or 9 plays, taking a big shot down the field to him whenever he's in single coverage. Even not caring at all the coverage, what it looks like going out, as long as there isn't safety help and he's in man-to-man, just throw it up. And that's just something Tannehill, I think in particular, he wants to see the guy wide open before he throws that pass. And I think that's one of the reasons he struggles with the deep ball. Sometimes you just got to trust that in a one-on-one matchup, your guy has that advantage. And I think that would go a long ways against Buffalo is we want that. I have to, because they're not going to have film on Miami using Devontae Parker. They haven't hardly played him. So I think that would be an excellent way to take him off guard. And, when I was saying run the ball, I'm not suggesting they bring Earl Mitchell in and have him play fullback all game to run the ball. But the reason I like the second tight end in there is just because, in particular, if we are going to go with Jason Fox at left tackle, I know it limits your offense and the number of players you have out in your route, but they have got to help him. I mean, we cannot go into this game and let Mario Williams just eat Jason Fox alive and just crush. Tannehill may get knocked out for the year. Something that happened to Tony Romo. We can't expect our offense to just run those same play calls and expect Jason Fox to hold up all game, where you're going to end up having Tannehill get blindsided for a major turnover or worse. And so that's, to me, it's at some point you got to just realize we don't have the personnel right now at left tackle to just leave him on an island all game long and risk the outcome of that. I guess that's where I'm thinking.
Well, to be fair to the offensive line, I think the offensive line this year is equivalent to last year's or maybe better. And they didn't do well against Buffalo last year, but they did win the game, and they held up for the most part. I didn't like Juwan James that much at left tackle, and Dallas Thomas was not very good at all at right tackle. So I think at some point this season, I think they're going to be better against Buffalo than we expect. I'm not expecting a miracle, but I looked at last year, and the same defensive front, I think they got, 5 sacks in that home game, which is not good at all, but they were considered the worst offensive line in the league, or one of them, and I don't think they are this year. So, that's a positive, in my opinion. I'm just trying to put lipstick on the pig here, but I think they didn't do hideous last year against the Bills, and they are a little bit better this year, so maybe that'll work.
Chad and I sweated through that game, Duke. We went there, and more than half the stadium, it felt like, was full of Buffalo fans, and it was not a pretty picture at all. I mean, the offensive line was bad. It was bad. I understand they won, but it was not a pretty picture.
I mean, think about it like this, though. You had Juwan James playing left tackle.
Yeah.
Thomas playing right tackle. Does that make you feel, if you knew that going against the same offensive line, and forget Rex Ryan, I mean, there's not a whole lot you can do defensively different with that front four. I mean, maybe they bring pressure somewhere else. I don't know, but it's the same front four. Do you feel better about Jason Fox at left tackle and Juwan James at right tackle? Or do you feel better about that than you did with Juwan James at left tackle and Dallas Thomas at right tackle?
Yes, yes, I do, because Dallas Thomas does not belong at right tackle. At least somebody's where they belong.
So, I mean, in that
I think Duke's internet
guys
is
were
having
awful
a hard
last
time.
year.
I'm concerned that when we have a rookie right guard right now, and I love the potential Jamil Douglas has shown, but I'm concerned that is he going to be able to go mistake free? I mean, we're going to be going against. I'm not sure if it'll be Derek. Do you know who usually plays left tackle for Buffalo? I don't know if they shift him around or not, but that's
Glenn.
What's that?
It was Cordy Glenn. I don't know if he's still left tackle or not.
Yeah, it is.
So I don't know how he'll do in that matchup throughout the game, if he'll make very many mistakes. I don't honestly. I know that Dallas Thomas was horrific at right tackle, but I don't know that Jason Fox is not as equally horrific at left tackle right now. I mean, the way Jared Odrick was just shoving him back into the pocket. So maybe they'll work on some techniques or something, but. If I'm Buffalo in that game and we start Jason Fox at left tackle, I match Mario Williams up on him all game. And I just think the outcome of that is extremely dangerous if we're not very careful. Now, obviously, there's a lot of things they'll do to try to game plan around it, try to run away from it, roll Tannehill out away from it, and things like that. But that matchup makes me very, very concerned. Now, on the bright side, Jacksonville, a lot of people don't realize this. Jacksonville has very good linebackers. And so I don't know that Buffalo has the same quality of linebackers that Jacksonville had. And so we do have some potential, I think, that we could function with the read option a little bit, because that read option is very, very good at helping your tackle, because your quarterback is consistently making that defensive end respect containment, or at least forcing a linebacker or safety to respect that containment of Tannehill taking off and running. And that it's risky. I know you don't want to get your quarterback hurt, but that's something Miami may want to consider early in that game, and maybe not even the read option plays, but literally just roll Ryan Tannehill out, maybe have him make 1 to 2 reads, and if it's not there, just tell him to take off and run. And that puts a lot more pressure on the Buffalo linebackers as well, that can possibly loosen them up, so you can start to utilize Jordan Cameron and Jarvis Landry into those matchups more frequently. So I'm not trying to sound doom and gloom. It's not like Miami has no chance to win here. I just think that I'm very concerned that based on their history, Miami is not going to change their offense very much, and they're going to run a very similar play set, which requires our offensive line to form a pocket for Ryan Tannehill so he can throw 10 and 15-yard passes. And I don't think that's a good matchup right now against Buffalo. I hope they have some creativity. That's what I'm looking for.
Well, supposedly when Ryan Tannehill is running in the read option, it's actually his call whether he keeps it or whether he throws it or whatever you want to say. But I want to transition, because we've been talking about Buffalo and we've been talking about the strategies for Sunday and we've been talking about all this stuff. I want to transition into the coaching staff, and we're talking about they're making strategies, but it seems that the strategies are just not working, and people are getting ready to go to find Joe Philbin's house and murder the man in his sleep, which is not a good thing. So I want to ask you guys, and I want you to be brutally honest here, because a lot of people are saying this man needs to be fired yesterday, and some are saying that they're not willing to let him go just yet. I want to hear your takes on it, and I'm going to start with you, Kathy. I want to hear what you have to say, because you haven't said anything all show.
Sorry, guys, I'm back. I think it's too soon still. I mean, I know obviously we've been with these coaches for a while, but It's only week 2 of the season. I think people are just overreacting, and I mean they have a right to. We haven't played great, but I don't think it's time to, be calling for anyone to be fired quite yet. It's disappointing, like I said, but not yet.
And why do you say that? That's the thing, though. It's like people keep asking me, give me one good reason why they should not be fired.
I mean, we have a lot of new players on our team. They're still adjusting. It takes time for it to click. Like Ian said earlier in the show, we had a slow start last season too. So, you know, it's unfortunate that we, had a slow start against the Redskins and Jags, but hopefully we can turn it around. And the coaches can't be than the players are. I mean, it was just awful. So hopefully it's kind of a wake-up call for everyone and they turn it around and figure it out.
I personally am not a big fan of fire the coach, fire the coach. To me, you have to tell me what is your plan if you fire him, and what are you
Exactly.
expecting? And so I believe Joe Philbin needs to be a little more dynamic in what he does offensively. And like I was saying, I just think if you were guessing on defense what he was going to do, he's just too predictable. And I don't know if that's him or Bill Lazor, to be honest, right now. But so I mean, I think they could do a better job, but I don't know that firing Joe Philbin helps anything right now. Because I mean, what are you going to do then? You're going to promote Lazor? You're going to promote Coyle? I mean, who's going to become the head coach? And I have, I know Olivier Vernon did something extremely foolish in that game, but I don't know that I've seen that Joe Philbin has lost this team. If they come out against Buffalo and they just get shellacked, like 40-0, and halfway through the second half, it's clear that they're just lackadaisical or they're not even trying. Then I could see some calls for Joe Philbin because that's a sign that he's lost his team. But if Joe Philbin was 2-0 and we had just blown those two teams out, I would not expect this to be an easy game whatsoever. And so this is a tough divisional matchup against a quality opponent. I know New England, threw up a lot of points right away on that Buffalo defense, but Buffalo is absolutely a playoff contending football team. And so to expect Miami to just come in there and blow them out or win the game, I don't know that you can fire a coach because he can't do that, because Buffalo is capable of beating any team in the NFL, and on more often than not, they're a good team. So to me, that's what it's about. You go with that. Now, there was an interesting article written. I don't know if some of you saw this. I know Jeff Darlington was retweeting it, but it was very interesting, and it was chronicling Tony Sperano and the Wildcat, and they had just went 0-2 at that point, and they just got pounded by the Cardinals. And at that point, it was looking very bleak. They were 0-2, and that's when he went to his coaches, and they did the Wildcat installation, and totally took New England off guard. And as Dolphins fans will always remember that game, on how amazing it was to see Miami come out of nowhere with this new offense and just shellac the Patriots. And so, to me, that's just something they got to look at. I just, if they continue with the same old, or that, there's the philosophy is you either are very dynamic offensively and you surprise teams. A lot of like coordinators, I like to say, like Gary Payton does, and Belichick does it to an extent where they'll come out in a 2 wide receiver set, they'll jump into a 4 wide receiver spread offense, and they're very, very unpredictable to defend at what they're going to throw at you on any given game. I mean, New England's a great example of how do you prepare for New England? Are they just going to split everybody out and throw all game, or are they going to power run all game? And I'd like to see Joe Philbin and their offense be a little bit more unpredictable for a change. I think that would help them dramatically. So to me, I guess my critiquing that he needs to improve, but I don't understand the calls to fire him. I don't see how that helps. That would be my opinion.
See, this is the thing, and I'm glad that we're talking about this now, because after the game, my mentions were absolutely slaughtered by people who were calling for Joe Philbin's head on a pike, for Kevin Coyle to be murdered, burned at the stake, and all that stuff. I mean, it was It was not pretty to look at. I eventually started getting tired of even talking about it. I got tired of dealing with the drama of it all. I'm not a drama person. I would prefer to ignore it if I could. I would prefer to avoid it.
Hey, Lewis, I got a real quick question while you're on that topic. I don't know if maybe
What,
you
the
guys
topic of drama?
No, on Coyle, about everybody like going after him in the defense. I haven't. What are people thinking that he's doing so wrong from a coaching standpoint that they're blaming him? Because I mean, honestly, they've shut 2 teams in a row down, making adjustments at halftime.
Probably what it is. The most common complaint really is something that people are just not aware of. It's that they think that it's his idea that the cornerbacks play 10 yards off the ball and they're nowhere close to where the wide receiver is. And I keep trying to tell these people that that's up to the corners. Brent Grimes and Jamar Taylor, Bryce McCain, all these people, they have their own leeway to do whatever they want on the field. That's their call, not Kevin Coyle's. But then they come back with something along the lines of, well, Kevin Coyle gives them that permission, he shouldn't. So, okay, so if you don't want him to give them that permission, then you're basically saying no matter what he does, it's a problem. Because so let's say that his strategy is to play 10 yards off the ball. So, okay, so no matter what, there's nothing you can do. He either has to do what the fans want, or he's condemned to hell, because there's no way he can do anything other than fail. And in their eyes, anything less than complete domination is a failure, because, again, you have Ndamukong Suh, Cameron Wake, Olivier Vernon, Earl Mitchell, then you have Jordan Phillips, and you have Derek Shelby, and you have Terrence Fede, and you have all these highly talented players on the defensive line, and yet there's no pressure on the passer whatsoever. So
here's the ironic thing real quickly about 10 yards, 5 yards off. If Walt Aikens had been 10 yards off the I think it was the wide receiver, right, or the tight end, whatever it was.
It was Allen Robinson, right, the touchdown?
No. Late in the game, that sack would have gave the ball back to the Dolphins, and they wouldn't have continued to drive down the field and kick the field goal. So that's the ironic thing. Everyone's saying, oh, keep on pressing. Well, guess what? They did press. His arms got in the wrong spot, and 5-yard illegal hands to the face, automatic first down. It would have been 4th down, and the Dolphins ended up losing on that same drive. So.
Yes, but then it's Walt Aikens' fault, not the scheme.
Yeah, that's my point. Is like I haven't. This is just from my observations.
Don't put your young guys in that situation if you don't have to.
Or I understand that. So the critique then of Coyle is that he's not positioning his guys where they feel they should. But to be fair, I haven't noticed like Miami having a lot of blown coverages in their secondary. Coyle can't go out and play defensive line and play run defense. He can't play linebacker. What I'm looking for are guys running the scheme properly, or they're getting in the right positions. And I just haven't seen that, and is he doing adjustments? I'm not saying our defense has played well. I mean, obviously we've had 2 bad first halves in a row. But, I think about that and I say, when was the last time you guys remember Kevin Coyle getting a call defense when we were up 14-0 in a game, or 10-0 in a game by the start of the second quarter? I mean, do you remember maybe since San Diego that we were in that position?
Here's the thing about Coyle, though. I mean, you're right. He has been great the second half, but for whatever reason, he's not very good in the first half. And I don't know if that's scheme. I don't know if that's players not being in position. I don't know what it is. The fact of the matter is that some of the players on defense have lost a lot of faith in Kevin Coyle. And some of the players on defense are not buying into the system that Kevin Coyle is bringing to the table. And it's been like this dating back all the way to last season. If you go back to the Green Bay game, I think in Week 6, you go back to the comments after that game, and you'll hear people talking about Kevin Coyle, players, and why he did this and why he did that. I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it, but there is something going on between Coyle and his players where they're not buying into a system, they're not trusting him, he's not trusting them, and there's just this back and forth. And until he changes, which I don't think he is, I've lost all faith in Kevin Coyle as defensive coordinator.
But you said you still have faith in Joe Philbin, to an extent.
I do have. I've been a staunch supporter of Joe Philbin. I will continue to be a staunch supporter of Joe Philbin unless things get ugly really quick. I don't I mean, indirectly, this has to do with Joe Philbin too, because he oversees Kevin Coyle, right? He should have fired Kevin Coyle at the end of the season, but that didn't happen. I know there are supporters of Kevin Coyle as well, and I understand that and I respect that. But I mean, I don't know. You see with Laser, he tries to change, and I know I haven't really been hard on the offense on Twitter and whatnot. Laser tries to change. He tries new things from week to week. Philbin, you see the changes and improvements he's made year to year. With Kevin Coyle, it's been the same story for the past 4 years since he's been here.
You probably need to make a case other than you've just seen it. I mean, you got to give examples because nobody's going to believe it otherwise.
See what?
I have examples of the opposite. I'm not a big Kevin Coyle supporter, but if you want to go back to last year in the Green Bay game, do you guys recall what our offense did on their last possession in the Green Bay game?
They threw an incompletion, and that was the end of
that. They went 3 and out, and they didn't run the clock down. And so we, rather than win that game, we handed the ball over to Aaron Rodgers and expected our tired defense to stop them. Our offense, nobody was talking about the offense. Our offense was unable to win that game, and it gets blamed on the defense. Same thing happens in Detroit. We get the ball, we have the lead and the ball late in the game. We go 3 and out. We give the ball right back to them, again expecting our defense to win the game. Fast forward to this year, Washington, our offense is unable to score more than 10 points. We have to have Jarvis Landry return a kick for a touchdown to get the lead. End of the game, our offense is unable to run the clock out. Our defense has to intercept Kirk Cousins to win that game. And so my point is Kevin Coyle always has to defend a full offense because our offense is unable to score points early on to get a team behind. So he has to play inexperienced quarterbacks, and even though we're playing Kirk Cousins and Blake Bortles, their teams are consistently in a position. They don't have to abandon the run. They don't have to go into the shotgun and run hurry-up offenses to try to score. They get to run their full offensive playbook, and Kevin Coyle is expected to call a defense that completely shuts that down because our defense should not be allowing Jacksonville to score 3 points in the second half, is what I'm hearing people say is, oh my God, Jacksonville came down, they kicked the game-winning field goal, and they won. Our defense is horrible. To me, I'm like, our offense was being given the ball over and over and over. Now, granted, we had some bad plays. We had holding calls. We had drop passes, and we didn't execute. But I fail, I guess, to see from the macro level how everything's being blamed on our offense when our offense has consistently been unable to run the clock out and win football games, and they've been consistently unable to give our defense some support and getting them a lead. I mean, with this offense, with the skill players we have on offense and the type of offense they run, we're not a power time and possession offense. It's designed to score points, and when we don't score points and we only get 2-3 minutes of possession, and we're letting our defense having to play probably 3/4 of the first half, and we're expecting them to come out and just shut teams down. I just don't think it's realistic no matter who you have as a defensive coordinator.
I think a lot of the issue too is like, I mean, I definitely haven't been like a Coyle supporter. Like, I would have fired him after last year because last year he continually showed that he doesn't make adjustments. And so now it's really weird for me to hear after 2 games that Miami's defense has made adjustments in the second half of games. That's not the case. He hasn't made any adjustments. Like, Miami's defense isn't doing anything different. It's just guys are executing. Like, that's what it comes down to. And it's been the problem in the first half as well, is guys just aren't tackling. They're not making open field tackles. They're not wrapping up at the line of scrimmage when someone has their arm around a guy and they're just not finishing, and then he goes for 15 more yards. Or it's a really mistimed penalty like Jamar Taylor holding in the secondary on 2 third downs in the first 2 games. Like, I think it's too easy to blame coaches. And I mean, I'm certainly not. I think everyone's blaming the wrong coordinator. It's not Coyle that's done poorly, because remember what he's dealing with. So yeah, his defense is fairly conservative. I mean, it's a simple cover 3 with a safety playing robber in the middle of the field or attacking the line of scrimmage. But guess why Rashad Jones or Walt Aikens is always attacking the line of scrimmage? Because your linebacker unit is terrible besides Jelani Jenkins. And guess what? When Jelani Jenkins is taking a bad angle, which he got caught doing a couple times last game, you literally have nobody in that secondary besides the other safety that can tackle. So I think that like the personnel is a really big issue that is getting overlooked. Like Miami's been just not even worried about the linebacker position for years now, and they got lucky with Jelani Jenkins. And if it wasn't for Jenkins, this would be easily the worst linebacker unit in the NFL. These guys they're not playmakers. They're limited players in what they do. And that's why you're basically seeing them play three safeties more often than not, because that's where the talent is. But that's still going to hurt you in various forms of the game. And there's really not much else that like Coyle can do. Like he's kind of stuck with that because his cornerbacks are small, and maybe he prefers that, which is fine. But that leaves you vulnerable when, I think the only big complaint I could really have about Coyle this season is I don't think he did a good job in the week before the game allowing Bryce McCain to ever be lined up against Allen Robinson. And it's not because McCain's not a good cornerback, and it's not because he can't play outside. It's just because of his skill set. His skill set is not good on deep balls. It's just not where he wins. He's a small guy. He doesn't play the ball very well when he turns the back on it. And there's no time that he should have been lined up against a guy that has literally shown since college that's what he's the best at, is going up and getting the ball at the high point and finishing a play. So, like, that would be my big knock on Coyle. But, like, if you look at Jacksonville, outside of their first two drives, which are probably scripted plays, so you expect to really do well on those plays anyways, Miami did really good on defense. And, I mean, they did enough to win. And I think Coyle's done enough. Like, I feel like it's very convenient to blame the coaching staff in that regard because, like, people aren't sure why or what's going wrong. And, I mean, the pressure is coming from the defensive tackles, too. Like, Earl Mitchell and Ndamukong Suh are both top 10 in the NFL with pressures, quarterback pressures. They're just not getting the sacks. They're not finishing the sacks. And a big problem is the secondary is leaving guys open. So, like, it's been a mess. It's been a bit of a mess. I mean, there's not one person to really blame for it all. It's not just. I mean, Coyle, could he do things better? Yeah, absolutely. I think he could have his defense early on playing a little bit better in the game. You want to probably see guys a little bit more excited, but I mean, Olivier Vernon hasn't been doing well. Your best edge setters are your second team defensive ends. I mean, Cameron Wake is basically unplayable on running plays now. Olivier Vernon has not been overly good. He hasn't been good as a pass rusher. And so, I mean, then what's he bringing to the team? So it's like, if guys aren't performing, those are the guys that need to get blamed. It's not necessarily the coordinator's fault. Like, it shouldn't be up to Kevin Coyle to get Cameron Wake amped up and playing well. Like, that's ridiculous to me. Come on. The guy's, Hall of Fame type talent. He needs to be playing well. I just think like a lot of the blame's going on defense when the fact is like offense, you've got an offensive coordinator who just admitted after last game when he sees a 1 or 2 yard run, he's afraid of running it again. But the whole point of the zone blocking system is to run consistently so that you're wearing down the defense so that you're getting 3-4 yards every single run. And then throughout the game, you're hopefully stretching that to 5 or 6. And you're controlling the ball. And you're resting your defense. And the whole point of the system is to not necessarily be like a power gap system, which you're willing to do like 1 or 2 yard runs until you break like a 50-yarder. The whole point is consistency. And the whole point, too, is to build off of that running game into play actions. And Miami's play actions are so specific to their formations, which is partially why I don't think Tannehill can really audible, because they've got so much motion going on pre-snap that you can't really just change that in the time frame that you have to snap the ball. Like, their motion is so specific to working off of the run that when the defense knows that you're only going to run the ball 12 times a game, they're not going to respect it. They have no reason to respect it. And it's ridiculous to me that Laser has gotten a pass because of his apparent credentials entering Miami. I mean, the guy hasn't stayed in one spot for more than 2 or 3 years for a reason.
And
like,
let me add to that by saying that I believe Ryan Tannehill makes Laser look better.
Yes.
Last year it was the kind of the other way around. After watching this game against Jacksonville, my thought was Ryan Tannehill is system independent. He's not I mean, you wouldn't necessarily throw him in a vertical offense, but I think he's at a point now that you could say I could win with this guy. Put him in any type of offense, and he's going to do well. I think his footwork has improved. His pocket awareness, just some of the stuff that he did, like the touchdown pass to Damian Williams where he rolled and turned left. I've not seen him do that very much. And so I think he's actually making Laser look like a better coordinator because he's playing so well. And I'm just going to add on to what you were saying is, look, people can fuss at Joe Philbin all they want to. They can fuss at the coordinators all they want to. They're not the guys out there on the field getting holding penalties. They're not the guys missing blocks. At some point, you have to say, look, this is what we're going to do. You need to go out there and do it. And if they can't do it, I mean, you're limited in what you can do resource-wise to improve that. But you've got to do something. I mean, but you can't just blame the coaches. I mean, yeah, you could run the ball more and do things like that. But, I mean, every drive in the second half, with the exception of that touchdown drive, there was negative plays. A penalty, a sack, something where just somebody on the field failed. You look at last year in those games you mentioned, Joe Philbin, that was the Green Bay game was the infamous Queasy game where he said he saw something where they got some pressure, and he decided to run the ball as opposed to try to throw it and win it. In the Detroit game, Tannehill rolls out, hits Charles Clay. Charles Clay drops the ball. They settle for a field goal. The next drive was a 5-yard run by Daniel Thomas, a 0-yard run by Daniel Thomas, and a play where Tannehill has to run for his life and basically try to force the ball to Jarvis Landry. And that's how it goes. That's not coaching. That's just guys who can't do what they're supposed to do on the field. And, I mean...
To go with that, though, I'm not looking at it like specifically. I'm just looking at it from the, from an outside standpoint. And when we go into this Buffalo game, honestly, if you guys give your honest opinion, what do you think is more likely? Do you think our offense scores more than 28 points, or do you think it's more likely our defense is able to hold them under 20? If you had to guess which scenario is going to happen, what would your pick be?
The argument against what Duke is saying is that the coaching and all that stuff, they are responsible for making sure the guys are disciplined. Essentially, suddenly the problem now is that because Joe Philbin has become a player's coach, whatever the heck that means, they've decided that he has lost all discipline and the players are now just doing whatever they want. It's essentially the prisoners run the prison. So I don't know how much of that you guys buy into it. I don't know if you want to believe that because Philbin has loosened up, suddenly the discipline is worn down and now penalties are flying around. Do you guys buy into that?
No, I don't buy into that. But what kind of? I mean, other than Olivier Vernon, I did see a lot of what I would call poor discipline. If you want to critique Philbin, I guess you could say he's not doing a good enough job getting his team to play at a peak level. I mean, that's fair to say because they're not performing. But that again, I'm kind of with Ian in that if it requires a Al Pacino speech from Joe Philbin to get Cameron Wake geared up, we've got more problems than Joe Philbin. And so they're making mistakes. It is early. I mean, you have to understand that. Now I would expect them to be more ready, but to me, it's you got to put some of it on the players. And when I'm looking at coaches, I'm looking at are there breakdowns in what they're supposed to be doing on assignments? And to me, that's coaching because they didn't have their players properly coached and ready for that. And I haven't seen, I guess, if Greg Jennings drops a pass and Tannehill hits him in the hands, I have a hard time blaming any coach for that. If Jason Fox just gets run over, I have a hard time just blaming the coach immediately for that. You can say they should have had a different left tackle, but they don't, and so I don't know that you can just throw that all on Philbin either. So, I just don't see. how it can all be thrown at the coaches, and that's just your quick fix, is to immediately fire somebody and blame the coaches. But I will say I can't blame Coyle any more than Laser. I mean, 100% with Eon. I haven't seen Laser. This offense has not been dominating, and exactly as he said, if you are not going to attempt to control the clock and run the football, then you have to score points. If you're going to throw the ball and throw the ball and throw the ball, that's great if you're throwing touchdowns on the board, because then you're helping your defense force the other team to have to do that same thing, and you're putting them into a situation where they have to pass. But what Miami, at least in these first two games and a lot last year, what they do is they go in and they try throwing the ball, incomplete. They do a lot of 3 and outs, and they keep their defense on the field a long time. And if you just look at the sheer number of play counts the defense is getting relative to what our offense is getting, of course you're going to have teams make plays on our defense. They're on the field so much.
And
I think
part of it too is just to keep in mind, like, some of these mistakes are coming from guys that really haven't played. So like Walt Aikens, like, yeah, he's going to get torched in a one-on-one situation against Allen Robinson because he's never been in that situation before. Like, it's just like you have to play these young guys at some point, and you have to build through the draft at some point. And so there's going to be growing pains when that happens because they just haven't had that game experience that you literally cannot replicate. Like, you can practice every scenario that you want, but until the bullets are flying, like, sometimes you just make a mistake, and sometimes you try to be the aggressor and you guess wrong. And it's just you really just can't do much about it, and you just hope for the best. And at some point, though, you have to throw guys into the fire. And when they get burned, you hope that it's a really good learning opportunity and it's a good coaching moment. And that's really where you want to see the coaches, say, okay, Walt, like, next time that this happens, try to stay over the top. Or, Jamar, instead of doing this, that's, I think, where you'll see better coaches excel. And hopefully that's what we see from Miami here in the coming weeks, is when they're presented with that opportunity again, because that opposition will be doing exactly what Jacksonville just tried to do by isolating guys one-on-one downfield. Hopefully they just end up performing better as a result of coaching going back over it in film study and then on the practice field as well. So, I mean, again, it's week 2. Like, try to keep that in perspective. It's a long season. It's not like they lost this game, in week 14 last year when you're trying to get into the playoffs, which I know that's like a scarring moment too, that the last couple of seasons have ended with a sour taste in our mouth. And so that recency kind of stays into our mind. But the realistic is it's a new season, and there's a lot of new players. There's a lot of new guys that haven't played together before. So I would just try to keep that in mind. Like, things are more likely to improve than to stay the same or get worse.
And part of what goes along with that, though, is you've got to look at this fan base. And at least from my experience with our website, is that when the negative happens, when a loss happens, especially a loss like this, the first thing that happens is people want a magic fix. I've seen a lot of stuff saying, well, these players aren't talented enough for this or that. Miami's the 3rd youngest team in the NFL. There's going to, like you said, there's going to be mistakes. Jamar Taylor's in his 3rd season. He's played less than half a season's worth of snaps.
Right. He's basically a rookie outside of, like, off-season time.
Yeah, he's not got a lot of these live snaps to where he can learn on the field, and that's not a position that you can just come in and excel immediately. That rarely happens, and I think a lot of the fans that I have encountered, that's what they want. They expect Miami to draft Ed Reed in the 7th round and him come in and become a Hall of Famer immediately and just everything go peachy, and that's not how it goes. I mean, you've already got Rashad Jones, who's maybe the best safety in the league right now, or at least at what he does.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, to expect Walt Aikens to come in and be a perfect complement, yeah, there's a drop-off there with Delmas. But people are saying, well, he's just not an NFL starting caliber player. Well, it was his 2nd start, or at least this season. I don't know how many he got last year. But, I mean, he doesn't even have a full season's worth of start, maybe not even half a season's worth of starts. You can't just expect that guy to come in and immediately be great.
No, and I along with that, I think he's a starting caliber talent. He makes mistakes, but he's a very talented football player, and so I would much rather see them have him in there right now, making some mistakes, getting better, than to have a lower ceiling player that might position himself a little bit better, but is going to always be a liability due to his limited ability.
Would you
And he was
guys
solid.
say
He
that?
was solid in week 1 too.
Would you guys say that regarding Coyle, a legitimate complaint that could be made is his apparent unwillingness to play young guys? Because we've got our buddy Jeff Hyde here in the chat room, and he found the defensive snap counts for players that he's been wanting to play, and he's been looking at Jordan Phillips. Phillips only played 14 defensive snaps against the Jaguars, and it seems that every time Jordan Phillips has been on the field, he's made things happen. And that just says to me, well, that means that Jordan Phillips should play more, right? But then we have Kevin Coyle and his history with not wanting to play young players for whatever reason, even though they're succeeding. And even when you have like an obvious upgrade, I don't know how you feel personally, Ian, about Kelvin Shepherd or you, Duke, but it seems to me, just personally, that Zach Vigil's floor is at this point Kelvin Shepherd's ceiling. So if it were me, I would throw Vigil in there and let him get his snaps.
Well, he's playing Vigil. I mean, it's not like he's not playing Vigil at all.
Vigil only played, I think, 7 snaps according to Chris Perkins. I think that was what it was, and Shepherd played the rest.
Jacksonville.
Yeah, they flip-flopped. Yeah.
He played more in, I thought, in the Washington game. But Miami pulls both those guys off the field whenever they go to a 2-linebacker set. So their snaps are going to be limited based on the situation that they're defending, of course, too. But I think it's a fair. But I mean, with Jordan Phillips, what are you going to do? You're going to give Ndamukong Suh less snaps and Earl Mitchell less snaps? And I don't feel like those guys are huge liabilities right now either. And so it's it's a lot like, and I hate to, not that I'm comparing these two as a player, but Miami drafted Deion Jordan a few years ago, and was he not getting snaps counts because he wasn't a good player? No, it's because he was behind Olivier Vernon. And so do you bench Olivier Vernon and play Deion Jordan? You're in a similar scenario with Jordan Phillips. And right now you got to wonder, was it the right move to not grab a linebacker in one of those first 2 rounds? Granted, I think Devontae Parker is a talented player, and I hope to use him. But the fact is, Devontae Parker had, 1 or 2 catches the whole year, and we're at extreme difficulty with our linebacker talent right now. We could have had Hendricks in there playing linebacker right now.
Well, that was the guy I really wanted. And if Miami had gone out of the first 2 days of the draft with Devontae Parker and Eric Kendricks, I would have been ecstatic. That would have got an A++ grade for me. I know a lot of people were big on the linebacker from Miami. I can't remember his name, Perryman. I watched some.
He hasn't played.
I watched some tape of him, and he looked like he was he was kind of slow to react for what I like. I think Kendricks was more of what we wanted in a linebacker today, and he would absolutely be the nickel guy in there with Jenkins right now. And based on what I've seen, I would trust his coverage ability over anybody that's on the team right now aside from Jenkins. So I wish they could have gotten him. I think he went before Miami picked anyway, so I was a little disappointed.
No, he went after Parker, didn't he?
Well, I'm just saying they couldn't have.
They couldn't have had both of them. I'm not saying Devontae Parker is a bad pick. I think talent-wise he's good, but if you're looking at the team right now, at least in the short term, which player would they need a lot more to win right now? And I don't know.
The good thing is I think the upcoming draft is supposed to be fairly loaded at linebacker, and so I think that's where they will go with it. I'm hoping they will. I've seen a lot of people that kind of pick on Jamar Taylor, and they're talking about how bad he is. I've not really watched. I didn't get to watch much of the second half of this past game on the All-22, but I watched the first game. I saw 2 catches that he gave up that I would consider he got beat. I think it came out. Someone tweeted that he gave up 7 out of 8 completions. I was like, yeah, but most of those he was playing off, and the guy stopped short. One of those was Jamison Crowder on a wide receiver screen, and it gained 0 yards. Did he give up the completion? Yes. Was that getting beat? No. They set him up in that game perfectly. They put Garcon on him, set him up for a double move, and he nearly got the pick. I'm like, this guy is playing better than what people give him credit for. Is it to a point that I would not be concerned about it next year? No, but I think he's improving, but I'm with Ian. I think the linebacker's just a big mess, aside from Jenkins, and I think that's the reason you're giving up a lot of these big plays because the corners, I think, are having to compensate a little bit in what they do because I don't know.
Okay, so but you brought up
In
Dion
the middle
Jordan.
of the field is going to be wide open.
Oh, you were talking.
Dion,
I'm sorry.
I was like Dion Jordan would be. I would put him on the line right now. I mean, when he was in there, he played all right. He would gain some pressure. He would be over Chris McCain at this point.
Dion Jordan's got his own problems.
I mean, talent-wise, obviously,
Yeah, I know.
the other stuff, but yeah, I don't know what they're going to do with him. But based on what I've seen so far, I don't think they can get rid of him. Unless he's
the reason I brought him up was they brought him in and they just didn't have a need to play him despite him.
Yeah, I get the comparison, Chad. I get the comparison, but that's what I was going with. So with Dion Jordan and Olivier Vernon, you have a legitimate point. But what's the excuse with Vigil versus Shepard when it's painfully obvious that Vigil has much more potential than Shepard, and Shepard is doing bad as it is? Why not throw Vigil in there?
Well, my first thing with that is watching Vigil is I think right now he lacks just functional NFL strength. One of the things I read about him, a scouting report, is that he is a linebacker that he beats you to the spot, and that's how he makes tackles. If a guard gets his hands on him, he's pretty much done with. Now, I did see him get off some blocks in the preseason, and that was kind of promising to watch. But right now, if you put him in there on a running play, if he doesn't beat the guard to the spot, he's going to get washed down the line, and it's going to be a big play. That's the difference right now between he and Shepard. Now, on passing downs, maybe it's different. But right now, I think he just lacks the strength. I mean, he's already got I think his arms are a little short. You need to be able to make up for that. He needs to get stronger. There's potential there, but if he can't get stronger and get off of those blocks, then he's just going to be a liability because NFL guards are going to be too fast. They're going to hit him, and he's done with.
So his middle linebacker instincts and all that stuff are good. He just needs to hit the weight room for a year or two.
He just needs to get that. He just needs to be able to get off of those blocks, and having the shorter arms is going to limit that. But if he can
limit it,
if he can do that, then he's got potential there. If he can't overcome that with power and with the instincts, then he's going to be basically a backup his entire career. And that's nothing wrong with that, but you can't. That's the difference between him and Shepard right now. Shepard, in the run game, he's a liability too, in my opinion. But he can get off blocks at times, and you saw him. He did make that play in the fourth quarter and got the stop. I don't know that Vigil would have done that at this point.
Well, I think
that was a really good job of capping that.
Yeah, definitely. But I'd say with Kelvin Shepard and Vigil, that's close. But the issue there is because I don't believe Shepard or Vigil are NFL caliber starting linebackers. I mean, that's the real issue you're facing right there. And I mean, I was watching that Monday Night Football with San Francisco, and granted, this is one of the best guys in the game, and their middle linebacker Bowman. But I was like, holy cow, could you imagine having a good middle linebacker like that, the difference it makes on your defense? And that's the fact that we're having to play Kelvin Shepard is concerning to me because we had a whole offseason to address that, and we didn't get that done, whether it was by trade or by getting somebody in there that was capable of filling that role. And Cole Messi actually probably is a better middle linebacker, at least against the run, but we don't have a functional strong side linebacker to shift over there. And I don't know what we're going to do if, like, Jelani Jenkins gets hurt for a prolonged period of time.
Good Lord.
I mean, and even Cole Messi. I mean, we're really in a tough spot at linebacker right now. And, I mean, I think the coach has had is that Ndamukong Suh was going to require so much double teaming with Earl Mitchell and stuff in there that it would limit the ability for teams to use their linemen to get out on their linebackers and help them a lot. But it really has not been the case. And, I don't have a good – I think Vigil is still a better pick over Shepard, even though Vigil is limited. At least Vigil, to me, seems like he attacks the hole a little bit better and has the potential to make a tackle for a loss. I don't see Shepard doing that. But they both just lack the physical capability right now to be dominant linebackers.
Well, the problem with that, and I agree, is I believe the coaches decided they wanted they wanted the defensive line pretty much just to clean out the trash and let the linebackers have free reign, and that's not happened yet. And it happened some in the first half against Jacksonville. They didn't run as much up the middle that I could see, and they were taking care of that. But yeah, right now,
Yeldon's not a bruiser though, so that was the difference.
yeah, and I mean you're gonna face guys like that, and I'm actually less worried about. Maybe I'm just being weird, but I'm less worried about LaShawn McCoy this week because he to me seems more like a dancer. He's going to be a guy that's going to try to make something happen, and I think our line and linebackers will be able to handle him a little better than say Carlos Williams, who looks like he's a little bit more of a power back. But yeah, I mean right now, and they're playing Sue a lot at one tech, and he's getting a lot of those double teams. But I don't know. I'm with you on that. I think Vigil's got the instincts, and at some point you just need to let him go with it. I mean, I don't know. I just don't see the situation getting better anytime soon this year, and it needs to be addressed next year because that's, Sue can't do it all.
Sue can't do much of anything right now. Speaking of Sue, I want to ask you guys because Matt put this on Twitter earlier this morning and pretty much said that somebody, and apparently it was an assistant coach, had leaked to Adam Beasley that Sue was going rogue on Kevin Coyle's scheme, and later in the day, Charles Robinson of Yahoo essentially confirmed that report or something along those lines. So, are you guys buying into the whole idea that Sue is just kind of doing his own thing, or is this just fake smoke trying to get Kevin Coyle to be the scapegoat?
I don't do drama, so to me that's drama. I think the chances that Ndamukong Suh is just ignoring the play calls all game is extremely unlikely. I'm not saying there might not have been one play or something where he didn't do what they were supposed to do and the coaches wondered what he was doing or something like that, but I mean, come on, that's what I would have to say to that.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I was watching and I don't see where they could have even been talking about. Maybe when he lined up a defensive right tackle, which is not his normal spot, he didn't line up often there, but maybe I thought, okay, maybe there was just confusion and maybe he just didn't do what they had wanted him to do. But I mean, this is a guy, he has been eating double teams and he has been opening up things. That's why Earl Mitchell is I think he's number 4 in the league with quarterback pressures. What they're doing with Sue to eat blockers is working. There are holes for linebackers to hit. They're just not really doing it, and that really shouldn't be overly surprising that they're not. It's not sexy, and I don't think it's really the best way to use Sue. But I mean, he did that in Detroit too. This wasn't a guy. He didn't have 16 sacks a season at defensive tackle. You're not going to get a sack a game from him. Now you're going to probably have 4 or 5 game stretch where he has a sack or 2 a game, and then he may have 6 sacks after those 4 games. That's just kind of how football works sometimes. Sometimes it takes some luck to get a sack, and not all sacks are earned the same way. But I think he's actually played fairly well. He hasn't been dominant as what we saw last year when he played against Miami, but that was probably also his best game of the year that he had played. So, I mean, you'll have the ebbs and flows of a season where guys aren't completely dominant, but you also have to think too, he's not getting any help from the edge players. So he's getting stuck with 2 blockers. That's all you can ask from him on that play.
So you don't believe the whole I'm Detroit Lions and Ndamukong Suh and I have DirecTV and I'm cable in Ndamukong Suh and I'm in Miami or whatever?
No, because he was already paid before. You got to remember, he was one of the last ones to get one of those giant contracts as a top 5 pick. It's not about money for him. He's out there and he's in a little bit of a different scheme. He's in a little bit of a different role. Miami does have him playing as more of a 2-gapper a little bit more often, not all the time. And I think that's okay. It's just it's just how football works. I mean, you can be a very good player and be playing well and still not necessarily seeing that reflect on the stat sheet.
In particular in the trenches.
Right. Sometimes it's just lucky stuff. And like I said, he's still top 10 in the NFL in pressures, and he hasn't played his dominant game yet. like that's actually a positive. Like, and then you can look at it and say, well, Earl Mitchell is playing the best football of his life, and why is that? It's because of Ndamukong Suh. Like that's a direct result of Ndamukong Suh. So I mean, it's just difficult because it's one of those positions that's kind of like cornerback that like it's very hard to keep that in perspective because the scheme may be asking them to do different things, and it may also just be a matter of, well, he didn't make the tackle, so he's not being good.
Yeah, and right now I think I'm more concerned with the edge guys. I mean, I never thought Olivier Vernon was worth what people said he was going to get this offseason or next offseason. I think to me, his worth comes in being versatile, that he can slide inside a little bit in nickel packages. They used him some like that last year. I know Wake is injured a little bit, got that hamstring, and maybe he was limited a little bit with that. I don't know, but
That was the story anyway.
Those guys are supposed to be getting pressure, and they're not. I mean, Wake got the sack. I mean, they both would have picked up a sack. They got erased by penalties in the last two games, but still, you need to do. Those guys, that's what their job is, and they're just not doing it well enough. And so I mean, it's almost as if it is becoming a one-man show on that line, and you can't. That's not going to work. I mean, I've just not seen enough out of Wake this season to be. And he goes through stretches like that. I don't know if it's old age catching up with him, relative old age, I should say, or if it's just just something going on. But Vernon, I mean, I don't know. I mean, we just need. We need some more pressure from those guys off the edges, and I think that's going to open up things in the middle for the defensive tackles a little bit. Right now, they're not having to worry about them, and so they can focus on taking Suh away. And that, I think, is what happened in the second half of the Jacksonville game. I mean, Shelby and Fade played that, and I like those guys, but they're not elite edge rushers like Wake is. And they pretty much just said, we're taking Ndamukong Suh out of this, and we'll make those other three guys beat us, and they couldn't.
Well, and again, I hate to be a broken record here, but when you have Cameron Wake, it's no secret in the NFL, he's average at best at run defense. And so you want to get the best of Cameron Wake, give him a position where you know the other team has to pass. You know, we've played two, I would say, below average quarterbacks in the NFL right now, and we didn't really even get to use Cameron Wake to just pin his ears back and go after them and try to get pressure on them. They're able to run a conservative offense all game. And so again, it's a team sport. It relates back to offense. If we get up on a team, and Buffalo included, you want to beat Buffalo, make Taylor have to throw, the whole fourth quarter. Make him in a situation where they're playing behind by 10 points, and you will see just how good Miami's defense can be, because they suddenly get to finally play with a one-dimensional, situation. So all of a sudden, those defensive ends like Olivier Vernon and Cameron Wake and even Terrence Fede, they look a lot better when they know for sure the other team is going to have to pass. I mean, it completely changes the way they can rush the passer.
And if there was ever a game to run the ball, it's this one. I mean, it's the first home game. I know it's a late start, but you're in Miami. They're going to have the heat. Buffalo's going to be in their dark jerseys. Force the defense to get tired. Force that offensive line to get tired. And I think if we can do that, I think in the fourth quarter, I think you're going to see Miami's defensive line start to eat a little more, because those guards and the center is going to be, they're going to be hot, they're going to be tired. We're out in that sun, and then and then those guys are going to start get up the middle a little more.
Okay. I hope we could balance that time and possession out, because I mean the last two games have not had that. If we are not going to be able to beat Buffalo if they're getting 3/4 the possession time in the first half. I can tell you that.
Okay, yeah, I agree with you there, Chad. Because this was a topic right after the game, and I know that we don't want to really talk about this much, so we'll just make it a really quick little evaluation here. I was getting tweeted at all the time right after the game, and I said, and we mentioned this earlier. I mean, Chad, you were the one who brought it up. It was that who would take over for Philbin the next year, or even right away, if they wanted to do that? Let's be hypothetical here for just a moment. Who legitimately would be a replacement head coach when Philbin when/if Philbin gets booted out of Miami? Because I was immediately hit with the John Gruden and the Bill Cowher, and I had to tell them, like, no, try again. They're not coaching again. They're not leaving their cushy tushy jobs in the studio. So I want you guys, and Ian, you were the one who gave me the list of like legitimate possible replacements. So I want to hear you guys say, like, who would you legitimately look at as a replacement, assuming Philbin gets the boot next year?
You mean this year or next year?
Well, if it's this year, then it's Coyle or Laser, obviously. But so let's just say next year.
And I wouldn't count on that either, because Stephen Ross knows that how big of a negative that is. That's the worst thing you could basically do to a potential head coach is a new guy, is to say, oh yeah, you have job security, but oh, by the way, I just fired my last head coach in an embarrassing fashion in the middle of the season. So,
well, especially if you don't. I mean, if he fired him at 1-1, that would give a new coach
that would be bad.
It would be like the Browns level bad. So
I would say realistically, if you guys, for Philbin to get fired, I would say if we lost to Buffalo, Tennessee, and the Jets, if we lost those 3 games, I think Philbin could potentially get fired. But I think if he wins one of those games, I just don't see it likely Ross is going to fire Philbin during the season unless it's just a complete, we're
it would have to
1-8 or something
super
like that.
bad. Yeah, you'd have to have Sue Tannehill and Wake come out and be like, this guy is just a complete idiot.
Yeah, I don't.
And they're not going to do that.
No,
right.
I don't have any idea next year because you never even know who's available. But I'll let Ian, go if you have some ideas of some potential people that may be available.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the big one, if you're going to look at the NFL, is Sean Payton. I think he would absolutely be the number one, hands down, guy that you offer everything to. He's facing a situation in New Orleans that is just imploding on them. They have an old roster. They haven't drafted well, and Drew Brees is now hurt. And honestly, Drew Brees was not good last year, and he hasn't looked good this year so far when he is healthy. So I think that's a situation where
it's that Luke McCown commercial. It jinxed him.
That's right.
And one thing about that. Sorry to interrupt, but one thing about that is Drew Brees, if I'm not mistaken, has a very
Are you talking, Duke?
So,
Duke, say that again.
I think Drew Brees' contract is such that they could cut him next year and save a lot of cap space. Yes. So that may happen. So if they don't win the division this year, and I don't think they're going to, I think they're going to start over, and I think Peyton would be out.
Yeah, totally agree.
Y'all know if Drew Brees gets cut, there are going to be a bazillion Dolphins fans yelling to get him in there, right?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, you want to bet?
I'll tell you what, though, I'd be at the head of the line trying to get Peyton. I think he's one of the better offensive-minded coaches in the league.
If people complain about Ryan Tannehill's deep ball, wait until they see Drew Brees throw a deep ball.
Yeah, Tannehill is easily the better quarterback right now today. The only reason that people would have Brees above him is I don't even think that's I thought that at the end of last year. I don't even think that's that hot of a take. I think
it's reputation you're fighting against, though.
If you could put Drew Brees' mind in Tannehill's body.
Oh yeah.
You'd have the best quarterback ever.
Yeah, but
did difference Tannehill throw interception in that Jacksonville game? I don't think he did he?
No, he hasn't.
He almost did at the end there, forcing one, but hasn't he had, I thought they even popped that statistic up in that game. He's got to be approaching 150 or so pass attempts without interception, hasn't he?
Yeah,
he's somewhere around there.
He's way up there. And, I mean, to me, that's the sign that your quarterback is good. Is he reading it and not throwing foolish passes? So I think that's dying down. But anybody on the get rid of Tannehill crowd, bring in Drew Brees would be insane.
Okay. Anyway, sorry, but I got you off track, Ian. What were you saying about the head coaches?
No, you're good. So I think he'd be top of the food chain. if Ross wants to go with like big names, I think Urban Meyer would definitely get a call from Ohio State. I don't think he'd ever leave Ohio
Yeah,
State,
he wouldn't leave.
but I will say though, like if he would, you'd have to think Tannehill would be very attractive to him. You'd have to also think that he'd probably be very interested in getting Ezekiel Elliott as he's going to leave Ohio State, or some other player like that. Like if you're going to bail on Ohio State, now's not a bad time to go to the NFL. But I don't think he ever would. But still, I think you make that phone call. I think he's a great coach, and I think he would do fantastic in the NFL. Um, Auburn's coach, Gene Chizik, I don't think he's going to be the hot name, even though I think he'd be a really good NFL coach because Auburn's kind of struggling right now. But if they stay in the NFL, I think you have to look at guys like Kyle Shanahan if you want like an really good offensive mind, a good NFL pedigree. He's always been around athletes. I don't think you have to worry about him interacting with players or leading players. I think that's who he is, and it's who his family is. Josh McDaniels.
I think yeah, there we go. Because I was about to say, I think the Dolphins fan base is tired of rookie head coaches.
Yeah, and I get that, and you kind of take a leap of faith with Josh McDaniels, but you also not give him complete control over everything. He's probably the most attractive coordinator if you want to go coordinator route, just because if you look at what New England has done with their offense, it's like, yeah, it basically all revolves around Gronkowski, but what they do with that personnel is really, really, really impressive. Like they're actually able to get production out of just random running backs that they get off the street. Deion Lewis is pretty talented, so like I don't include him in that. He's just had injury issues, but now that he's healthy, he's actually pretty good. And like we already knew that. We've seen him flash other places. But like Julian Edelman's development is really incredible. He's a very, very good receiver now. But when he was just getting into New England, he wasn't even a receiver. So like I think that goes a little bit to how they use him. I think he's probably like the most attractive NFL option. The rest of the coordinators is kind of weak. You'd maybe look at Greg Roman from Buffalo. I think he's done a nice job already with Buffalo. I think he did a good job in San Francisco as well. Kaepernick just kind of crapped the bed there, and it made him look especially bad. But it's not a great group unless if you're going to swing for the fences. And more likely than not, you're probably not going to get some of those big names. Maybe like I saw someone mention Gary Patterson from TCU, so he's a defensive head coach. I would love that. I mean, I think he's a fantastic coach. The issue there is I don't think he's a sexy enough name to maybe go over like a coordinator. Like I would do it, but thinking of what Tannenbaum's going to do, who already has a relationship with Eric Mangini, that's easily the most heavily rumored one. Like if you talk to anybody about the situation, like agents, pretty much like any person that has any type of opinion on it, they're gonna say Eric Mangini's gonna be the favorite for it. So and that's kind of interesting.
The rebuilding of the Jets continues in Miami, if that's the case.
Right.
Can you guys give me a little bit of a insight, and the rest of us too, because the most I know about Mangini's tenure as a head coach was there was this one article I read about him with the Cleveland Browns, and the players absolutely hated him. So I don't know much about Mangini, but apparently he's the most obvious look, but he's apparently also the most unpopular one, other than
he's a big Belichick protege. But I don't really count the Jets as anybody's tenure to count. It just seems like that's a whole different world there with what their owner does and.
Well, it wasn't the Jets that I read it. It was with the Cleveland Browns.
Well, the Jets was his big opportunity, I would say, to be a head coach, where he didn't do a lot. But I think that the McDaniels ones is very intriguing because not only does it, you get a coach that has done a lot with New England, it takes him away from New England, and I would hope that he would have a realistic concept on how to defend New England's offense, because I haven't seen a defense yet that's had a really good grasp on slowing it down.
Yeah, I see where you guys are going. Again, like we were saying earlier, it's really too early to be looking at new head coaches. But I just wanted to touch on that because I wanted people to throw names out there, because they were telling me that Philbin needed to be fired and it needed to be the end of that, and Philbin needs to get out. But nobody ever actually gives any kind of solution. It's always
Yeah.
Philbin needs to get out, and we can have insert random person here. Like, you can even throw a teddy bear out there to play head coach, and yeah, that would be better than what we have now. And that's like, you can't do that. Come on, you need a head coach. But nobody's ever willing to actually give a name.
Oh, and again, the scenario, if Sean Payton's available, of course, in the offseason, but as of right now, if Philbin goes, it'd have to be something crazy, like Ian was saying, where our star players are speaking out against him, or we're starting the season like 1-8 or something crazy like that, where we're clearly out of the playoffs after like 5 or 6 games. But otherwise, if we get into late in the season, and let's say it looks like we're going to be 7-9 or something like that, I don't even know then that it makes sense to fire him unless you really are considering like Laser or Coyle, somebody as your head coach, and you just want to evaluate how they do for a few weeks. Otherwise, I don't see the point in just firing Philbin rather than just, at that point, that's the thing all fans hate, that your season's over before the season's over and you're just basically playing it out and looking forward to next year. But I don't see many scenarios where it would make sense to fire Philbin. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I'm with you there. So anyway, there was this one other thing that I wanted to touch on, and it probably won't be long, but I wanted to touch on it just this way because we posted one of the articles on the website on our Facebook page, and it got a very angry response from a certain someone. I will not say the name because, So the comment reads that Tannehill is also a problem. We need to stop with the excuses. He missed at least 3 wide open receivers downfield, and any one of these plays would have given us a victory. Stop saying he's not part of the problem, because along with everyone else, he is. It's stuff like that that makes me wonder if you are a QB rating drone or you just really don't like Tannehill because, oh my God, deep ball. Because if anybody who watched the game knows that Tannehill was much more aggressive. He was making throws that normally he wouldn't even try to attempt. There was that bullet to Stoneburner in the end zone. I mean, how can you look at all that and say that Tannehill's part of the problem? You must be a results player only.
At one point in the second half, Tannehill had 24 attempts and had 250 yards. The simple math there is he had over 10 yards per attempt average. That's pretty good. And aside from the very first play with Rashad Matthews, I think a lot of his deep passes didn't have a lot of yak associated with it. I know similar to Jordan, he maybe got a few yards after the catch, but it was mostly stuff deep in zones, and there wasn't a lot of movement afterwards. So he was throwing the ball deep. A lot of his deep misses, according to, if you look at the play chart along with the game pass.
Yeah, Ian had a really good chart up.
Yeah, I saw his. I'm just talking about on the NFL Game Pass. It lists like the list of plays. It'll say Tannehill missed deep. Those were throwaways. He was running to the sideline and just threw the ball into the stands so he wouldn't get hit. That's not missing deep. The only one that I saw that was a bad miss was the Jordan Cameron. And if I had to guess, and I'm just doing this from memory, if I had to guess, it looked like he didn't take a full step into it. Maybe tried to short arm it or something.
You're talking about, I'm pretty sure Jamil Douglas got beat on that play.
Yeah, I think he could have stepped up more than he did. I think he was just kind of anticipating maybe a guy coming into him, so he didn't take a full motion with it. Maybe that's what messed it up. I don't know. I think that's also kind of what happened with the Greg Jennings play. I do believe it was a miscommunication there, but there was a guy in his face then too, and I don't know that it necessarily affected the pass, but it could have. But either way, I mean, the point is there, he also had 2 passes in the first half that gained a grand total of 2 yards, and that was by design. And he still had that huge yards per attempt average in the second half. He finished with over 8 yards per attempt for the game. I mean, he was pushing the ball down the field. And I don't even look at necessarily completions for me. Completions can be anything. I mean, if you look at the Allen Robinson catches, aside from the one.
Sorry. Yep.
No, Duke.
He
Don't say it again.
Sorry, my computer's been doing this all night. Aside from the Walt Aikens play, He got inside of Grimes on that first deep pass, and he just outjumped him. In the second one, he just made a play over Bryce McCain. I mean, they weren't perfectly thrown passes. He just made plays. So completions don't necessarily tell the whole story. But I was watching Tannehill. I mean, his ball placement in years past has not been good. I mean, you look at last year's Vikings game. He was throwing behind people, all kinds of stuff that was not perfect passes that were getting completed. His ball placement so far in that Jacksonville game was perfect. I mean, that Stoneburner touchdown was an elite pass. Very few mediocre quarterbacks ever make that pass.
I've been through this argument so many times probably the whole last year, because to me it was about halfway through last season it started to click for Tannehill, and Tannehill's been playing pretty solid football ever since halfway through 2014, in my opinion. But I always hear this, Tannehill's a problem, we got to get rid of Tannehill, but I have never heard a realistic solution on where you're going if you decide to not stick with Tannehill.
It's the same head coaching argument. There's no actual better idea. It's just do it because do it.
Right, and I mean, it's obviously Andrew Luck's supposed to be so much better than Tannehill, right? And I mean, who's struggling
right now? No.
And Andrew Luck is a good quarterback, but I mean, to me, it's like I always say, who do you actually think Miami can realistically get to replace Tannehill? That's my first question. That's going to improve the team. And my second question, usually just kind of being a smartass, is have you watched the Dolphins since Dan Marino left till Tannehill got here? And I mean, did you watch those years? Because those were bad quarterbacks. And Tannehill's heads and tails since anything we've had, in that time frame. And so, to me, again, I just think, every team around the league, if you even get an above-average quarterback, you're doing well. It's a have and have-nots league, and everybody thinks they want to have, Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, everybody does want those guys, but the fact is you can't just go and get them the next day like John Madden football. It takes years to develop quarterbacks often, and it's so hard to get a decent one. That's why guys like Andy Dalton are getting paid huge contracts, because he's a decent quarterback, and just having a decent quarterback in itself is hard to get.
I think, and also just to point this out. I mean, I discussed this with somebody I was sitting down with out, and I got into a discussion with him about Tom Brady really quick, and Brady really doesn't do anything spectacular. Okay, if anybody is the epitome of the 10-yard box that Tannehill is accused of being stuck in all his career, right now, and at least it's Tom Brady. And they still managed to find a way to win, but I don't want to hear about how Brady does all these awesome things, and all he really does is dink and dunk and give it to Gronk when he needs a big play to happen. So
I disagree with you a little bit on that one. Don't get me wrong.
Dink and dunk? I counted how many less than 10 yards.
I realize they dink and dunk a lot, but the reason they do it is nobody can stop it, and so why wouldn't you continue to do it? But to me, Tom Brady he's exceptional.
Part of it too. He is, but part of it too is like he's one of the worst deep passers in the NFL too. Like ever since Randy Moss has retired, his accuracy downfield is dreadful.
Well, yeah, they don't even really. I mean, since Randy Moss, they even worried about getting deep ball wide receivers. I mean, they go after guys that are really meticulous route runners like Wes Welker, and now it's Julian Edelman. And I mean, it gets frustrating because they literally just walk up to the line, they're reading the coverage, and they're doing a quick slant or a quick out, and they just do it several times a game, and then every so often they hit some seam routes to Gronkowski. And you would think, as the average fan, that can't you just double those two guys and stop them? But it's a lot harder than it looks.
Yeah, and that's one thing that we talked about earlier in the podcast with Tannehill being able to audible. Where Tom Brady beats you is pre-snap. The intellectual side of the game, he's going to outsmart you. He knows where to go. He knows when he gets up there what you're going to do before you do it. Same way with Peyton Manning. That's why those guys have been so good for so long. Same way with Aaron Rodgers. I think Tannehill could do that. I'd like to see him try. I mean, I think he goes up there with a lot of predetermined stuff, and I think that kind of makes him at times look worse than what he actually is. I'd like to see him go up there and say, all right, I'm going to read what the defense is giving me, and I'm going to, change the play or do what I need to do, and put the guys in the right spot. Yeah, so physically, Tom Brady's not going to wow you, but he knows where to go with the ball. Usually before the play happens, because he knows what's going on. I actually read something several years ago that said a coach or someone that had worked with the Patriots had said that Brady oftentimes would miss open players because a defender fell down, but he had read the coverage and did not expect them to be open, so he wouldn't look in their direction. That's just great stuff right there. So I would like to see Tannehill get to that level.
If he did that, we'd have an elite quarterback on our hands. But yeah, I just wanted to bring that up really quick because I felt like it needed to be reiterated one more time. Tannehill is not part of the problem. He's not. And for those QB rating drones who may hear this because a buddy of theirs said, "Here, listen to this podcast and learn something." You can't even use QB rating against him anymore because he's had a very high QB rating in his first 2 games, and the Dolphins have still struggled as a whole. So don't even go there.
The Jacksonville game was basically like watching Ryan Tannehill try to raise the Titanic by himself
With a pair of tweezers.
And he just about did. I mean, the penalties, everything. People talking about the defense, whatever. He did everything he possibly could to win that game. I mean, I just don't know what else you can say. Yeah, he missed a couple of throws. Every quarterback does. Tom Brady misses throws. Aaron Rodgers will miss throws. I mean, I just can't fathom how someone could watch him play that game and say, "Oh yeah, that's an awful quarterback play."
And that's all I'm saying. So we only have a few minutes left. So Chad, you wanted to go into this real quick. I want each of you to give a particular matchup you want to see against the Buffalo Bills. We'll do another show later in the week to really do a real preview. But we want to get this in while Chris and Ian are here. So Chad, I want you to go first. What's one matchup you're really going to be looking for in the Bills game?
I'm looking for, obviously the matchup is our offensive line versus their defensive line. And
that's not a matchup. That's a slaughter.
Well, I'm expecting our coaches to at least prevent their defensive line from completely destroying everything we're trying to do on offense. And so what I'd like to see, I mean, it's a home field game. I would like to see Tannehill doing a lot of hard counts. And I expect our coaches, if they do that, to have our offensive line ready to not false start. And that one thing that slows the defensive line down a little bit because they get tendency to jump. And so if you get them to jump off sides a few times, it slows down their pass rush. I also like to see them run some plays that take advantage of over pursuit of the defensive line, even if they're not overly effective. Run some screens, run some draws, and do some stuff to slow that defensive line down, so that we can at least get some opportunities to execute our offense in the passing game. So I'm expecting to see a game plan that's designed to at least help our offensive line against that defensive line.
Okay, that sounds good. Duke, how about you?
Ryan Tannehill versus Tyrod Taylor, because that's what it's all about, right?
Oh, for heaven's sakes. Okay, now your real matchup?
The real matchup is Rashad Jones versus Charles Clay. Because you know it's going to happen.
Oh,
somebody's going to cross the middle and they're going to collide. It's, Dolphin on former Dolphin crime, but that's going to be a good matchup because I just knowing Rex Ryan, I think he's going to try to use Clay a little more, just to kind of stick it in our face, and I think Rashad.
He said something. I don't know what it was. Okay, Duke, I don't know if you can hear me, but you stopped coming
that's
through.
Going to be fun to watch.
Duke, try again.
It keeps happening. Sorry. Yeah, I've heard like half the show tonight because of the way my computer's doing. But anyway, it's
You've done well though.
Jones is playing very well. I think Rex Ryan's going to try to use Clay just to kind of rub it in our face, and so I think that's going to be a matchup that I'm going to expect Jones to win, but it's going to be fun to watch.
How about you, Ian?
I will be watching Ndamukong Suh against Richie Incognito.
Oh, God.
I mean, Incognito's looked pretty good from what I've watched the Bills.
Well, isn't that a power scheme? That's his thing.
It is, but I didn't think he was that bad in Miami's scheme either. I always thought he was a pretty decent player for Miami. I think it was a shame that he was kind of let go. I've always kind of liked Richie. At least I liked him from Miami's days. I think he was really trying to turn his life around, and I think he did for the most part. Um,
Yeah, and then the
anyways, I
Jonathan
mean,
Martin stuff
obviously,
came out.
yeah, I was still rooting for him after that, though. I think Jonathan Martin's just a big pussy. Um,
Well,
anyways,
supposedly
though.
he's had issues all through childhood, so I'm not going to go there anymore.
Second that.
Yeah, anyways, well, more current things. Obviously, I will not be rooting for Incognito this week, but I am interested to see. I think Sue's going to get to the point where, he's really, I don't know if it's maybe pressure on himself, and maybe that's why he hasn't played. I think he's played well, but he hasn't had that monster breakout game yet. I think maybe this is the week where he is going to try to amp himself up. And my question that I have for him is, does he get kind of overexcited to play really well and have that breakout game to get the monkey off his back, or is he able to come out and really penetrate gaps, shoot those gaps between Wood, their center, and then Incognito, or what exactly is going to happen? Because we know both players are very fiery, both very competitive, both maybe even dirty. So, what happens from that matchup, I think is going to be fascinating.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. That's when you brought up Incognito, it clicked in my mind. Oh my God, the two supposedly dirtiest players in the NFL are going to be going in each other's faces all game long. Something's going to happen. I don't know what, but something's going to happen. So, yeah, for me, I think it's going to be more along the lines of whoever happens to be going up against Ronald Darby, because apparently the Patriots managed to pick on him pretty much all game long, and I'm hoping that whoever lines up against him will be able to do the same. Ryan Tannehill needs all the help he can get, and I think if he can find a way to pick on Darby, even though the Dolphins don't really seem to find players to pick on, they seem to just keep running their base offense no matter what, and I think that's what separates the Patriots from the rest of the teams in the NFL. What the rest of the teams in the NFL do is they're going to run their offense no matter what the situation. I think what it is with the Patriots is that they actually look for the weaknesses of the other team and exploit them to their fullest potential. And that's what makes the Patriots so hated, is that they're cold-blooded. They don't really care. They're just going to embarrass you every way they can, and they're going to pick on the people.
They force you to adjust.
Then once you make the adjustment, they fight. They pick on where you made the adjustment that weakened the other spot.
They do. They are going to exploit the same thing over and over and over on offense to adjust, and on defense, Bill Belichick is notorious for taking away whatever you're having success with that year. So, like, if Miami's playing the Patriots, I would expect them to completely focus on shutting down Jarvis Landry and Jordan Cameron and force you to beat him with your other players. And until you start to do that, he won't change anything. So it'll be interesting.
Yep. All right, so, okay, it was another 2-hour-long show. It always seems to be 2 hours long when we have all these guests in here, but I love it. This is awesome. This was an awesome show, awesome discussion. Got some good insight on the coaches, got some good insight on Tannehill, got some good insight on the Jaguars, the Bills. I mean, I really love this show. This was awesome, and I really appreciate you guys joining me for tonight. Ian, I want to thank you for joining us tonight, and if you want to follow him on Twitter, you looked at NFL Film Study. He has a bunch of awesome information. He's always giving us great insight, he's the voice of reason on Twitter a lot of the time, so I want you to go and follow him. And if you want to follow Duke, you go to @theEarl007. That's 007, and follow him. He's always good for a laugh every once in a while, and he also has incredible insight all the time. And of course, my co-host Chad Ronenbaum at GoFins4SB. That's the number 4SB. He's also got some good insight. We're all a bunch of we all do our own different analysis. Chad's good at the film study. Chris is good at the film study. He's good at evaluating, and Duke, both Ian and Duke have good rookie scouting ability. So everybody here is worth a follow, including me. I'm at FL Sport Debater. So there you go.
Do me a huge favor, and whatever happens after the game, win or lose, watch Ian's. I don't know why I keep calling you Ian. Sorry, Ian's film study, and do not read Omar Kelly's Twitters. Just go to Ian's film studies. It makes a lot more sense. It's a lot more reasonable.
Yep, I agree. Okay, so I want to thank you guys for joining us tonight, and you will be able to download this show off SoundCloud. The link will be up on the podcast page on the website tomorrow, and I'm really excited about this. I'm so glad that we're finally moving up in the technology phase a little bit. Now we don't have to. People have been saying we want to download the show, and I've only recently been able to get it onto SoundCloud. So I'm happy about that. So if you guys want to download the show and listen to it on the go, you can download the show on SoundCloud, and the link will be up ready for you. And I am Louis Sung, my co-host Chad Ronenbaum. I have Duke with me here. I have Ian, and Kathy and Matt took off a while ago, but they were here too, and they also provided their own specific insights and perspectives. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight, and take care.